evening and welcome to Zoryan Institute's Forces and Factors virtual gallery launch. We are so excited to open our gallery to the public today, COVID-19 style, and hear from some of the talented artists themselves. My name is Megan Reed and I'm the operations coordinator for the Zoryan Institute. I'm also joined by two of my co-hosts this evening, Zoryan Institute's program assistant Jenna Lemieux and outreach assistant Jennifer Haddo. The Zoryan Institute believes that visceral representations can often have more of a profound impact than facts. We recognize that art has the ability to transcend the barriers of language, provoke thought, and even promote and inspire social change. It is for this reason that the Zoryan Institute published the book Forces and Factors in 2019. This book, which I have a copy right here, features the artwork of multimedia artists from around the world whose inspiration for their pieces all relate back to Zoryan Institute's mission, the study of human rights, genocide, identity, and the relationship between diaspora and homeland. While many of the pieces in this book represent the personal experiences and diverse backgrounds of the artists themselves, they all remain relatable to the experiences of many, truly demonstrating art's ability to move beyond nationality, background, and beliefs to impact a wide audience in a profound and meaningful way. The Zoryan Institute has designed a virtual gallery to showcase select pieces from the Forces and Factors book. Patrons will be able to walk through the gallery, interacting with the pieces on display, and learning more about the story and artists behind each piece. This evening, all you have to do is sit back and relax and watch as we take you through the virtual tour. After the tour, we will be hearing from 5 of the featured artists who will be sharing their motivations and inspirations behind their work. And then we'll open it up to you for a Q&A with the artists, and we'll also have a virtual art auction as well. So before we begin, I will note that while this is a free event, we do encourage you to purchase a copy of the book, Forces and Factors, through Amazon Smile and make a donation to the Zoryan Institute. Any amount is greatly appreciated, and your donation and book purchase will really help the Institute continue its critical work in raising awareness on issues of human rights, genocide, and the relationship between diaspora and homeland. Both the donation page and the Forces and Factors book sale links will be shared in the chat box, so look out for those. So now we ask that you sit back and relax and enjoy the tour. And I'm going to pass it over to Jen here, who's going to share the tour on her screen here.
So just a little sample. We will be putting the link in the chat, and you're able to go and check out the gallery and walk around as you were. Obviously with that video, we didn't get a chance to click on all the pieces, but you're able to do that once you're in the gallery, and we really encourage you to do so.
Great, thank you so much, Jen. All right. Okay, so welcome back. We hope you enjoyed the tour. Like Jen mentioned, this will be available to you at the end, so you can go back, go and check out the little links and read all the captions if you weren't able to see them. And we also have the playlist. You can choose your own music and listen to that as you go through as well. So you can feel free to do that after the session tonight. The link is up and ready for you. So we're happy to announce that it is live. And now, before I introduce you to some of our guest speakers for this evening, I would like to ask Jen to open up our Zoom silent auction for 2 incredible pieces of artwork that you see up on your screen.
Yeah. So welcome back, everybody. We hope you enjoyed that little tour. So before I introduce you to, as Meg said, to some of the guest speakers, so the first piece we have, you should be able to see it on your screen now. Just gonna make sure I'm referencing it here. So the first piece has been generously donated by the late Sophie Evron. It's titled Inspirations. It's there under lot 1. You'll see the front and the back there. It's So the original Inspirations is a piece of artistic composition on porcelain, which stands at 6.5 feet high and 2.6 feet wide. So it's a really large piece. The artwork consists of 4 integral components, 3 of which are painted on the top, middle, and lower sections of the panel, while the 4th constitutes the perimeter motif. The artist was inspired by the 17th century of the proclamation of Christianity in Armenia. So that's lot 1. So if you'd like to bid on lot 1, feel free to put it in the chat, lot 1, and then where you'd like to start. I'll get to that in a minute. And lot 2 has been really generously donated by one of our artists here this evening, Jackie Kazarian. So this piece is titled Armenia Hayastan, and you may recognize it in the gallery. It was towards the end. So you'll be learning more about the inspiration and a little bit of the background on this piece in a few minutes. So we'll start the bidding for each piece, lot 1 and lot 2, at $50. And we ask you place your bids in the chat box, specifying which lot. If you have any questions, put them in there and we'll try and answer them as soon as possible. And we will run the auction through the remainder of the session. So you have tons of time to get your bids in, and we will announce the highest bidder at the end of the session for each piece. And all the proceeds from this auction go towards Zoryan's academic work in raising awareness of issues relating to universal human rights, genocide, and the relationship between diaspora and homeland. And we thank you in advance for your generosity.
Great. Thank you, Jen. And before I start, do we have Jackie on our call with us today? Hi, Jackie. Nice to see you. Okay.
Hi.
Hi. Good. I just wanted to double check. So we now have the pleasure of hearing from some of the artists themselves. So with us today, we have Jackie Kazarian, whose artwork was just featured in the last slide. Her piece Armenia Hayastan is the piece featured in our gallery and also in our art book. So thank you so much again for donating this for us today. We'll also be hearing from Nima Arabi, who had his light-based installation featured in today's gallery as well. We have Arpi Katruchian, whose Armenian alphabet series was displayed in tonight's gallery. Arpi, are you with us right now? Maybe she'll join in a bit. Okay, and we have Carolina Uscategui, a Canadian-based graphic designer and visual researcher who had her photography series from her latest visit home to Colombia featured in today's gallery. And we also have Talin Megherian, whose pieces Braids Tide, Braids Ascension, and Dance and Burn that were featured in the Forces and Factors gallery. My colleague Jenna will also read some of the statements provided by a few artists who couldn't join us for the panel discussion this evening. So welcome, artists. It is such a pleasure to have you here with us. And Jackie, I'd like to start by asking you a few questions about you and your piece. So do you mind starting introducing yourself to the audience? Where are you from, and what is your professional background, and how did you get into the arts?
Well, great. I'm really happy to participate in this panel, and it was really interesting to see some of the pieces there, some of the people I recognize their work. I live in Chicago. I'm a Chicago-based artist. I'm primarily a painter and do works on paper and some video. I do collaborations with choreographers, doing video backdrops and whatnot. Let's see, what was the next question?
So professional
yeah.
and how you kind of got into the arts.
Oh, okay. My professional background is I'm a graduate. I started in science, graduated with a zoology major, and then went to because I was constantly making art. I went to grad school at the School of the Art Institute, and so I got an MFA there, and then I taught there for quite a while afterwards. And I'm involved in Chicago arts community in a very deep way. I've served on panels and the Cultural Center in Chicago and on exhibition. I've been on exhibition committees, and I'm also an art ambassador for the U.S. State Department. I've done art ambassadorships in Syria before the war and in Kuwait a few years ago. And I continue to teach, but I teach workshops generally. I'm teaching, I do a lot of community art projects, and right now I work with a lot of women in some of the more economically challenging areas of Chicago, and that's I got into the arts by I've just always been really curious about how things work, and also I got involved in the arts by just doing pointillism when I was a child and in school, and then eventually just became obsessed about it. So I didn't go to college for it, but I certainly recognized that it was the way I spoke was through visual material.
That's great. Thank you. And Southside Weekly published an article about the piece that's featured here today, Armenia. And it's the piece that they published was Processing a Tragedy. Could you explain some of the inspiration behind this piece and kind of what was written about this piece?
Yeah, so this piece is it's a giant monumental painting. It was created in 2015 for the centennial of the Armenian genocide, and my grandparents came to this country from that genocide, and I was really wanted to do something to mark the 100 years. And I had worked with some materials commemorating my grandparents in the past, so this wasn't a big, it wasn't hard for me. It wasn't a big jump for me, although I didn't work as overtly with Armenian materials as before this painting. It was inspired partly by Picasso's Guernica, because growing up, nobody knew about the Armenian genocide, and I remembered people remember what happened at Guernica in northern Spain. When Franco sent attacked civilians in the turn of the century. It was the first aerial raid on the civilian population. And people know it was a big event. Picasso was outraged. And so I made this the same size as Guernica. It's about 11.5 feet tall and 26 feet wide. And it's on 3 panels. And it has, I didn't want to do imagery about, a lot of artists have depicted what happened, but I really wanted to do a celebratory painting that was about the culture. And so there's a lot of elements about the Armenian culture that survive. There's references to the illuminated manuscripts. There's I looked at a lot of ancient maps, so there's a reference. There's depictions of some of the vilayets, the Armenian villages that were involved in the genocide, and there you can't see them because this is huge, and well, maybe you can see them. And so some of the names are in Western Armenian and in English, and some of the monuments, I also have the monuments depicted, their architectural plans are depicted in the painting. And then it's all sort of interlaced with my grandmother's Armenian lace, or the tatting that the women used to do. So the circle patterns that you see going throughout, it's a landscape, but you see the circle patterns kind of like knitted all together. And that's from my own personal, connection to my grandmother. And then the hands are a gesture, on the bottom are a gesture of receiving grace. And also, I think of sort of as a resignation, sort of like a gesture of just sort of, it is what it is. Yeah, so, and then on the upper left-hand corner is sort of a reference to Picasso's bull, but it's an image from an illuminated manuscript.
It's a beautiful piece, and knowing how big it is in real life, I would love to see it up close. It's
yeah. And somebody wrote, the print that I have donated for the Zoryan Institute It's actually a print. So you're not getting this gigantic painting, you're getting a print.
Good, that's good to know. And this, you've already explained a lot about how your Armenian ancestry and background kind of influenced this piece. But maybe more generally, as a member of the Armenian diaspora, how does that play a role in forming your own identity in your artwork?
Well, it's really interesting. I realize that a lot of my work has to do with perseverance and sort of a adaptation in difficult situations, overcoming difficult situations. I mean, and also, I've done a whole series. I'm really connected to nature because I have this zoology background, but I also very early on, I'm really connected to trees, and I did a whole series on wounded trees and trees where the structure showed the way they adapted to some kind of crisis in their development. And so, and I think I attribute that there's a lot of sort of ideas of that, empathy, apathy, those kind of ideas and emotional content being in a land. I do a lot of landscape work, but there are landscapes that have like sort of an emotional yearning to them. So I'd say something like that.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Jackie. We'll come back to you at the end with the Q&A.
Okay.
So I'd now like to bring our attention to Nima Arabi. So Nima, I believe you're currently based in Toronto. Could you tell us a little bit about your background and your influences and when you became interested in art?
Sure. Yeah. So first, I have to say hi to everyone that they're with us tonight, and it's a great pleasure to meet you and see your faces finally. Yes, I'm based in Toronto, and I came here about 10 years ago, 8 years ago, if I'm trying to be like give you exact date. So I was born in Iran, small town in north of Iran. The town is called Babol, and I came here in my mid-20s. So it means that I grown up here, and I went to school there. I went to university. I was studying fashion and textile design in Iran, in Tehran, University of Art, and then I came here. And like about like my background, so same as all other children, I started my artistic exploration with pen, pencil, any sort of like material like that. For me was pencil, colored pencil actually, and I was trying to draw and doodle on any sort of like paper, on any sort of like surface. So this was my very first step into art, but my official step into art was when I was a teenager, 12 years, 13 years, something like that. I started to do some sort of like calligraphy, Persian calligraphy, and some kind of like typography. Again, it was kind of like a design base, and then it was my main influence to study graphic design in Iran, and then fashion and textile in Iran. And then I moved here 8 years ago, and I went to York University. I studied BFA again in visual arts, and I continued my education MFA at York University. Again, visual arts, and drawing and installation are my main media. And my main influence, well, it's kind of like hard to talk about like main influence or my influences, because 20 years ago, so I barely can remember, but my influences. But I'm pretty sure that I've always been interested in any sort of like imagery, mainly books. I couldn't read books. I was like too child to be able to read, but I always was fascinated to go through all of those pages of magazines, papers, any sort of like newspapers, and look at and poetry books. Look at their magnificent illustrations, sometimes calligraphies, and book design, all of those stuff. And also the environment that I grew up in was full of pattern, color, and details, from the rug under my feet to the lighting suspended from the ceiling. So all of those were detailed and colorful and full of lots of patterns. So I think that was part of the visual culture of the environment that I grew up in. And yes, I think that was my main influence. And yeah.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, right
Thank you
now.
so much. Thank you for that. Okay, let me see here. So the piece we're looking at is titled Homeland, and this
Right.
depicts Arosi and Shamse, and both are parts of a traditional style of Iranian architecture. What do Arosi and Shamse mean to you, and what does each element represent? Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure, definitely. I will start with their definition, not for me, their concept first, and then talk about like my initial understanding from them, and why I chose them. So Shams refers to the sun, or Shams, and is usually the main part of the central part of decorative design, like Persian design. And in architecture, it's usually take places on the interior side of the dome. So if you look up in like temples, mosque, and any sort of like historical places, you usually see them where you used to see sun in the sky. So Shamsa is the central part, and also it's colorful again and full of like details and patterns. And also Oracy is kind of like a sash window, a colorful stained glass sash window that became popular in architecture since, if I'm not wrong, since Safavid dynasty, like 5 centuries ago. And besides its function, which is mostly about like cooling down the heat of the direct sunlight, is usually so invited. It's kind of like brings some sort of like colorful light to the interior space of the uh, place that is installed. And I think I wanted to bring all these elements in my practice to somehow resemble the concept of home for myself. So yeah, the title talked about that as well. It's called Homeland. It's this installation. And yeah, like the reason I think is kind of like obvious, if I'm not wrong. I grew up in Iran, and I think I can say that it's impossible to grow up there and do not see these kind of like elements when you live there. So it's, again, it's part of the visual culture there. And I for me this piece it's full of elements that they're about like the concept of home for me. They're they mean home to me, like in a simple wording. And also, it's a light-based installation, as you mentioned, and light is critical to this piece. I would say, based on like Persian culture and Persian philosophy, or Islamic Persian philosophy, is kind of like hard to sometimes make the boundary between these two. Light is somehow spiritual, carries a spiritual meaning. Sohrawardi, a great Persian thinker from the 12th century, in his philosophy, introduces the light as the essence of the universe, sense of the word universe, or in a better wording, maybe, like, because I'm translating, sense of being somehow. Um, and I think light was another important element here in this installation for me, that defines all of these other cultural elements. The being, so the being here in this room, dark room, needs the light to be defined somehow. Even the shadow, even the darkness here. So yeah, these are critical elements of this piece, this installation.
It's really beautiful.
Thank you.
You kind of described your background, Iranian Canadian. Do you, since moving to Canada, do you think there's any Canadian influence over your art?
Well, it's I just can't say no, or like answer that like without ignoring Canadian culture. So Canada was my host country, and yeah, there was some sort of like influences here. I remember when I was trying to make this installation, as I talked, as I mentioned, that like these were some sort of a representative of my homeland, my culture, Iranian Persian culture, and they're kind of like giving some sort of information, at least, about my culture. But at the same time, I just wanted to bring it outside of my mind into some sort of like Canadian environment in which was my new home. So I was trying to adjust, settle, and ground myself. Um, it was my personal way, actually, to feel here, to feel Canada, and I mean like Toronto, as my new home. And I think, yeah, like I wanted to bring the concept of home or homeland again outside like of my mind, and look at it from kind of like a different perspective, from a wider maybe lens. And I needed to feel some sort of like connection with my home, with my culture again, like back home, new home, like the host culture, like the like background that I was carrying and still carrying out. And I needed to consider, yeah, all that happened to me from a like different perspective, like from some sort of like outsider, and to analyze my personal history, to understand my environment. And again, I think the most important thing, I needed to redefine the concept of home or homeland for myself. And I think, yeah, Canada was Canadian environment was the was playing a critical role here, and it's still doing that. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Nima.
Thank you.
Before I pass it over to my colleague, Jenna, I think there's a few questions in the chat for Jackie, just about the dimensions of the piece that's up for auction. Do you have any more information? Oh, you're just on mute. Let's see.
Sorry. Okay, the piece is, it's 21 inches high and 40 inches wide.
Great.
I can't translate to centimeters. You'll have to do that.
That's okay. We can figure that out. Thank you.
About like this.
Perfect. Perfect. That's great.
Sure. And it's an archival, pigmented inkjet print on photo rag paper, if you're into the details. And it's in an edition of, I think the edition is 150.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Okay, now I'd like to pass it over to my colleague Jenna. She's going to read a statement from Erica Egypt Hagen, who isn't able to join us today, but whose artwork was featured in the gallery.
Thank you, Megan. And I just want to say I've been communicating with the artists quite a bit, so it's really nice to see your faces and hear some of your stories. So fortunately, Erica wasn't able to join us today, but we were able to catch up with her before the event. And she gave us a little bit of an idea of the motivation behind her pieces. So Egypt, she also goes by Egypt. Egypt is an artist and muralist who often uses portraiture as storytelling. The pieces that Egypt is featured here are titled Palinquera, King and His Crowns, which you can see on the left side, and The Memory of Truth. According to Egypt, the significance behind each of these pieces is a sort of amplification of an untold story. She believes that we as humans all bear a story, and through inspiration, she enjoys creating these stories without using any words. These paintings consist of people or moments she has come across and have inspired her journey. Most of her artwork is inspired by different cultures around the world and identity. To her, identity means self-discovery and the experience that we all share and how they shape us as human beings, each individually. In Egypt's opinion, she feels that an artist's role in society is to inspire. Sometimes artists see things differently and creatively, as we see here tonight. It's the artist's mission to create a window which allows people to visualize and feel emotionally things in a unique way. Artists have the ability to bring communities together through their creativity. And when a creation speaks to someone, she knows as an artist that she has done her job.
Thank you so much, Jenna. Okay, and I don't think we have Arbi with us tonight. I don't see her up here. So I don't think she was able to join, but maybe we will continue to try to get in touch with her and maybe we'll come back to her afterwards. So we'll skip ahead. So Carolina, hello, our photographer today.
Hi.
Hi, welcome. So I'd love for you to be able to introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about how you got into photography, and then we'll dive into some of your pieces here.
Of course. Thank you for having me. Yeah, so my name is Carolina. I am originally from Colombia. I was born there, and I immigrated to Canada when I was 6. So I basically kind of grew up in Canada more. So what originates like through my photography is I am a graphic designer. And so our task as graphic designers is trying to find visual ways of communicating in general. And so that's through type and form, and that at times can include photography. And for me, these photographs and these sets of photographs are quite interesting because they were quite coincidental of the way they happened, as they were created through actual film photography. And it was actually because I was traveling back to Colombia, and a couple of years ago now, because I mean, we're in a pandemic, so we can't travel, but it was a couple of years ago, and I couldn't bring my DSLR. simply because we were kind of going to visit my grandmother who lives quite far away, and we kind of didn't feel very comfortable with that. So I bought a film camera off Kijiji because I said if anything happens, at least, it won't be a grand loss, and put some film in there and started photographing. And essentially the photographs of this series are what I see. It's the best way for me to describe it. And it's kind of like those kind of like, here we have my grandmothers. So Sarah and Victoria. Sarah passed away last year. So this photograph has a completely different meaning now to me, which is interesting. But the other series of photographs, which is like the military man, Tiskesusa, which is the statue, they're all kind of juxtapositions of this new world and the old world colliding together. So that's just a little bit about the series. And then background about me, as I mentioned before, I'm a graphic designer. However, I am very intrigued and I'm currently studying regarding data visualization and data information, and the interconnection there is between data visualization and life. And so one of the topics that I'm looking at right now is in Colombia, there's a civil war happening that's not talked about so much. And the way that the media is referencing the deaths that are occurring are quite unethical, as they are representing them as icons, or 400 deaths, and it's like this tiny little dot in a graph. And so for me, this dot is a representation of a father or a mother, someone's daughter. And it doesn't make sense when it comes to a storytelling aspect, that we are simplifying a life. And so, sorry for the tangent, but that is something that I'm currently looking at through graphic design. How can I communicate to you, obviously visually, but also emotionally? How can I get into you and for you to either feel happiness or sadness? And that's my goal. I'm not here to make solutions, but rather to bring some emotion in. So I am.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, they're beautiful photographs. And something we study here at the Institute, we have a whole section on diaspora studies here at Zoryan Institute. And one concept that we come across quite a bit is the concept of myth of return. And it's this idea that at some point diaspora communities will return to the homeland that they left, which is kind of seen as like this idyllic and peaceful place in your mind. But sometimes when you actually go there, it's different than what you're expecting. Was this kind of the case when you returned? Was it what you were picturing, or were things different? Could you explain that a little bit?
For sure. It's the complete opposite of the myth. Unfortunately, it really saddens me too to say this. My last memories of living in Colombia were through the lens of a child, and so it was quite innocent. I didn't really see the violence or the change or the pain that was occurring. So my memories at that point were just pure bliss. I would go to my grandmother's house, which was up in the mountains, and we would go to the farmers market, which was literal, like a field just of farmers. And same thing with my grandmother, Sarah, like we would go visit her, and it was a completely different thing. And so coming back, I'm now seeing my elders, like you can really see the change of age. And to a certain point, my elders didn't even recognize me, right? Because the last time they saw me was as a child, and
Right.
unfortunately, like Skype isn't a thing back then. And one thing that I really noticed was the massive growth of development. And so we have this notion that development is for, a further and better and more fruitful future. But when that development is implemented into, towns that don't fit that narrative, it starts ruining it. So within my grandmother's town, where it was essentially, fields of like fruitful land, of forests, of this beautiful tree that was there since the beginning, when I visited, it was all gone and dead. And it was just, businesses and homes. And I understand that, but that development does not conform to the land that it is on. And that's kind of the narrative that is currently happening in Colombia. So yes, that myth is a myth. It's not true for me.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about some of your influences as an artist. You shared a little bit at the beginning, especially your background as a graphic designer, and of course your history from Colombia. But do you have any other inspirations or influences that you pull from?
Of course, and it's going to be so cliche, but I'm going to say everything. Everything is an influence. I think if you're not influenced, if you bucket yourself to one thing, you might not find other ways of thinking. And so for me, everything influences me. Of right now, I would say, there's two artists that I deeply love so much. They're two Colombian women, Doris Salcedo and Carolina. Her name is Carolina too. Carolina Caicedo, and they both talk about very similar topics that I talk about, and they also mention, that idea of a person and data, and nature, land itself. Arturo Escobar is a Colombian anthropologist, and he's a great influence that takes place in all of my practices, both artistic, but also in my own graphic design practice. My family, love, I think is a great influence into everything I do. And those are just it, but everything is an influence for me.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. And again, we'll return in the Q&A. And I'll now ask my colleague Jenna to read another statement from one of the artists who couldn't participate in the panel, Adrian de Martirosyan.
Thank you, Megan. So unfortunately, Adrian wasn't able to join us today, but I'm honored to be sharing her artist statement for the pieces that were shared in the gallery. Memory is the history of time. Charles Olson. This is a quote that Adrian typically shares alongside her pieces. This piece that you see on the screen is entitled Passage Number 2. It's part of a series of works entitled Tattoo Trails 2 that explores the relationship between memory and identity. As an artist of Armenian descent, Adrian carries a history that embodies not only her past, but that of her ancestors as well. Her family's stories of survival are not only rich and textured, but also complex and traumatic. Their collective history has led her to consider how exiles that are separated from their homeland navigate their lives and their identities. She questions, how does migration affect them psychologically? Do immigrants face feelings of alienation, isolation, displacement? How are their cultural identities impacted by their separation from their homeland? Passage number 2 considers the voyage that an immigrant takes when forced to leave their country of origin. The centralized female form that you see in the piece displayed here serves as a sort of personification of one's homeland or motherland, and attests to the connection that an exile will always carry to their past. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. All right. So I'd like to bring to our attention our final artist for this evening, Talin Megherian. Talin, could you please introduce yourself to the audience and share a little bit about where you grew up and some of your artistic training and experience?
Sure. First, I just want to say hi to everybody that came. Thank you for attending, and I'm so pleased to be part of this group of artists and in this book, so thank you for inviting me. I am born and raised in Queens, New York, but I live in Watertown, Massachusetts now, which is heavily populated by Armenians, which I am. First generation on my dad's side and second generation on my mom's. I actually grew up with, my father was an Armenian priest, so I was very immersed in the Armenian culture and religion. And my mother she doesn't teach anymore, was a teacher, and she is an artist. And as a child, my artistic life was honored by my family. So my mother would also we would actually take classes together with an Armenian artist named Anahi Janjikyan. So I used to do kind of after school art classes throughout my life, growing up until high school. And then I studied at School of Visual Arts for 2 years, and then I transferred to Rhode Island School of Design. And in my final year of RISD, I did the European Honors Program. So I studied in Rome for a year, which was, you know, an amazing year. And talk about influences, that was totally embedded in my work. And such as, you know, it was in my work before the Armenian iconography came in. But I knew, you know, there was that pull always for the Armenian, but I just didn't really know exactly how that was going to come in. So that's basically my education.
That's great. Thank you so much. And this series is such a heart-wrenching series of paintings that reflects the Armenian genocide. And I was hoping you could let us know a little bit about how you came to this idea and what these series of pieces mean to you.
Yeah, so I actually got to go to Armenia in 2004 with my mother, which was really a wonderful thing to do together. And again, questioning and wondering how is that Armenian imagery going to come into my art, still not really knowing. Reading books sort of in the mid 90s, I finally found some like fiction or historical fiction and memoirs that included Armenian women that I started like finally connecting to my culture and my people in books that I was reading, which is kind of interesting because I'm a teacher and we're really trying to bulk up our library at our school so that all kids are reflected. And when I was talking to the other teachers about it, I was like, you know, I never read about an Armenian character in a book growing up like that. I never saw my identity reflected back to me. So I know the importance of that. But anyway, I'm going off. So yeah, after Armenia, it started to all bubble and flow. And after seeing what I saw and pictures that I took and drawings that I made and the braids, you know, usually if you see the Armenian dance costumes, when women are dressed in them, they usually have 2 long, like black or brown braids. And even if the women don't have long enough hair to braid, they actually attach 2 fake braids on. So it's very much a symbol of the Armenian woman. And the connection just happened. I was like, wait a minute, my mom saved my braids. Like, well, I grew up with these 2 long braids and came to a point when I was about 9 years old where it was time to cut them, and my mother saved them. And it just is one of those things that's so kind of obvious, and then all of a sudden your eyes just kind of open up and you see it. And it was exactly what I needed to connect myself to everything. So the braids show up a lot in my work. I have my braids. I paint the braids from when I was 9. When I was 51, yes, I'm older than that now, I grew my hair again. And actually it's getting pretty long now because of COVID. So who knows, maybe we could get some more braids out of this. So I got my 51-year-old braids with some gray in it. And I really want, when I get even a little older, some really heavily gray braids. And I was reading accounts of things that happen, horrible things that happen to women. And it is strewn through my work, but, you know, I think of hair and the power of hair and what we've read about hair in mythology and actually the physical weaving of braids and strength. And it's just become part of my pieces in where they might be telling horrific stories. There's a beauty and there's a pull in, and I'm wanting to draw people in to my paintings. And yes, in some I don't mean for it to be a trick to pull them in, but once they're in, I want them to really understand and feel and know, what has happened. And funny, this particular piece that you're showing, though, this one was very much about hope and rising, and it's called Ascension. And I also had read so many stories about wells in the genocide, and even in my own family, there's a story around a well. And this particular piece is about the water. It's rising up. It's coming out of the well. It's coming out of the darkness. So, yeah.
It's a beautiful series. Thank you so much for explaining the background behind them. And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about what you think art's role is in education for raising awareness about human rights and genocide.
I can speak very specifically to the fact that I'm an educator and teaching pre-K through 8th grade, and lucky enough to teach at a progressive school here that teaches the Facing History and Ourselves curriculum. I don't know if people know that.
Yeah.
So they do teach about Holocaust and all different genocides. And it means so much to me that my 8th graders are learning about the Armenian genocide. And our social studies teacher started pulling me into the classes, and I show them my work. And I sort of have the kids read the paintings first, and from there, they find their stories, and I talk to them about what's happening. But if we always get their responses first, which is great. And I was able to, there's an Armenian museum here in Watertown. So our students actually went to Project Save, where they archive all Armenian photographs, and they got to see the photographs. They had their experience with me. They've learned their social studies background in it. And then we did pieces of art actually responding to all of that. And the Armenian Museum gave the students a show, which was pretty wonderful. And so those are very kind of tactile ways of learning through. But I think otherwise, if somebody walking into a museum or a gallery, and art can absolutely is a way to learn about these things by stopping and observing and looking and taking in, just like the kids had to read the paintings in the classroom. I'm hoping that people are coming and reading what they're seeing in the art and having to observe and ask themselves questions, really. So.
That's great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I totally agree. I think everything, art kind of has its place in that education sphere. You don't necessarily always have to read the 20-chapter book to get the impact that sometimes art can get just from looking at a piece. And these pieces are really powerful. So thank you very much for sharing them with us today.
Thank you.
All right, so now at this time, I'd like to open it up to our audience for a few minutes and see if anyone has any questions for any of the artists on our panel today. You're welcome to raise your hand or type your question in the Q&A chat box, and I can ask it for you. So either one, and yeah, we'll open it up for discussion. Do we have any questions?
Should I answer it live?
Is there a question here?
One in the Q&A box, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I think I explained that already. Maybe somebody came in later.
Mm-hmm.
The braid is what we see often with the Armenian women's dancing costumes as part of the describing how a woman, looks. I would like to know deeper actually why Armenian women always had those braids, but I use it in a way to symbolize the the Armenian woman and see, because I have my braids from when I was a little girl.
Oh, thank you so much for showing us that. Okay, someone is asking, what is on the wall behind you, Talin? Is it a piece of art you're working on?
That's I'm trying to think of a nutshell way to describe it. It is a piece. I got a grant from Creative Armenia to do a piece about the 10,000 or more really khachkars that were destroyed in Julfa, which is in Azerbaijan. And it was really it was cultural genocide. And there were over 10,000 also other sculptures and carved pieces. Khachkars are literally translated cross rock, and sometimes they're like a headstone, but other times they could be something that somebody commissioned to have made for somebody that died. And there, you can't really see it exactly, but there's 10,000 letter Es written, Armenian letter Es written on across these. There's 90 paintings behind me, and each letter which stands for in Armenian is in the background, and then there are the paintings done on top. This is actually 16 feet high. I just don't have that kind of ceiling. They're going to be stacked on top of each other, and yeah, there's some braids in there too. That's your nutshell.
And we do have a few panelists with their hands up. So this is Anna. I'm going to allow you to talk. So you just have to unmute. Anna Adler.
I am just so delighted. Whoops, Mike. Okay. I am just so delighted to be here at this really lovely event. I am a friend of Talin's and a longtime fan of her work, but I love seeing the progression of this Armenian theme and sort of centralizing the lives of women in her work. So I'm just so glad to be here. She actually answered my question, so thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you, Anna. Okay. And we do have another question here from Jack Stepanian. I'm going to grant you permission to speak, and then you just have to unmute your mic.
Hi, thank you. My question is to Jackie Kazarian. I'm interested to find out, Jackie, do you have the 1915 project in your private collection, or is it displayed in a public place or in a private collection somewhere?
The painting is the painting is in storage right now in my studio. It's not in a. I mean, I'd like to get it to a public, semi-public, collection so people could see it. But no, right now it's stored away, rolled up. It rolls up. It can travel, and I'd hope that someday it can travel and to different places around the world, because that's why I made it into 3 triptych. That's why it's 3 panels, so that it could travel.
It's a beautiful piece. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Jen, you have your hand up?
I do. I have a question for Carolina. I wanted to know, I loved your story about film and film cameras. And I think there's something special about like only kind of having one shot compared to a digital camera. So I wanted to know if you still do photography, and are you working on anything? Do you use film as a medium these days? Is it just in graphic design or in general?
Yeah, for sure. Well, right now I'm not doing any photography, but I did actually previously, about 2 years ago, went back to Colombia, and I brought my film camera with me then. And yeah, no, I that's actually one of the reasons I really love film, because there's kind of a risk that takes place with it. That, not to throw any hate, but definitely an iPhone does not provide. And I do think also with a film camera, you, in a more technical aspect, you understand how light works, you understand how form works, you have to get your composition right, and you only get one shot. And so that's something that I really love. And in addition to that, within film photography, it's more real to what the eye sees. And at times you can get some sort of distortions, like maybe you put in too much light, and so you get like a very overexposed image. But that's one of the things that attracts me of it. And right now, I'm not doing photography very much, but I'm actually working in apps, and I'm designing apps, and understanding how they are able to interact with people, and how apps can be used maybe as a tool of help or aid rather than just like a void to keep scrolling on. But that's another topic. Thank you.
Great. And we have a few questions in the chat. So Lena is asking, can each of the artists speak about why they chose to work with their specific mediums? So photography versus painting versus installation. So I'm wondering maybe, let's see, maybe Nima, did you want to start?
Okay, so yeah, like why did I choose installation for this piece, if that's the question? Well, I just wanted to feel the space, the atmosphere. For me, it was important to make an immersive piece, and I think turning the room into homeland was capable with installation. And yeah, I think that was the main reason for that piece on choosing installation. And also this installation itself includes some sort of like drawing, as the paper was fabric layers, 5 layers of fabric, and the drawing materials was scissor. So there are some sort of like cut and using like scissor on the fabric layer. So yeah, it includes some other media, but yeah, mainly is installation.
Thank you. And Jackie, do you want to go next?
Sure. To tell you the truth, I am a painter because I fell in love with the smell of oil paint when I was a little girl. And, you know, like, I mean, you know, going to gas stations, I don't know, there's a relationship between petrol products and me. And, so, and when I was in 4th grade, my older sister, who's 5 years older than me, secretly had a woman, her name was Ramona Mitchell, paint the portraits for my parents for their Christmas present, paint portraits of each of their children. And so I used to secretly say I had an after school activity once a week. And for like 6 weeks, I went to this woman's studio on my bicycle, and I just was mesmerized. So so I became a painter, and then, you know, over a year, I've been painting for over 30 years. And I've developed a lot of knowledge about paint. I think that, you know, I would love to, I don't know, it's the way I communicate. It's kind of like I know that language now. So that's the only reason why that's what I work with now, because I really understand the language of paint, and I'm pretty good at it.
Yes, you are. Carolina, did you want to go next?
Sure, yeah. So the pieces that are seen right now are through my film photography, but I actually don't just stray within photography as a graphic designer. I actually stray into different areas. So not pictured here because it wasn't complete at that time. Those photographies are actually in reference to a larger project in which I worked with sculpture, and I created a ritual of mourning regarding the lives that are being lost in Colombia right now due to the civil war. So I work within sculpture, I work within bookbinding, and then graphic arts. However, I will say my strengths are most definitely within editorial and bookbinding. Those are where my strengths are, and slightly photography. But I think, you know, as designers and as artists, we're willing to dive into different mediums and see what communicates the best when it comes to our concepts, our thoughts, and what we're trying to say. And so I'm kind of a woman of many worlds, but bookmaking and photography have my heart right now.
Great, thank you. And Talin?
Painting has just, I mean, painting and drawing has always been where I've been attracted to. I kind of totally related to Jackie, and I'm just still completely comforted and mesmerized by moving paint around and moving it around, and then you come out with something. Like it's I don't know, it's just it's very seductive. But with this piece behind me now, I'm starting to get a little interested in some installation, and some new ideas about bringing light in are churning. So I hope to start moving out a little bit.
Fabulous, thank you. So this next question is a general one to all panelists, but because we have a lot of questions to go through, maybe one or two of you can answer this one. So do you find that working on your pieces helps to resolve questions or conflicts that you might feel about your own identity? Did someone want to take that one on?
I can go for that one because that one kind of hits home for me. Yes, it does. I think as the whole process of the photograph scene are a process of me kind of coming into closure of a life that is now lost. And that was the eyes of a 6-year-old child when she was in Colombia. And so I think another way of me working through that work is it allowed me to realize, you know, the riches that I have gained from Canada and the opportunities that I have gained, and even Canada's own riches through its economics and social and political, are all gained at some point through the dismissal of Colombia, and that's through mining and oil extraction. And so these riches that I gain are also, to a certain point, my life back home are being taken out. And so that kind of tug and pull and that tension really, really puts into perspective who I am as a person and who I am in between these two worlds. And my work is the best way for me to reconcile with that.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to answer that question? Should we move on? Okay, so our next one, for the two Armenian artists that we have with us today, which part of Armenian history or culture influenced you the most? And what aspect of your art do you want to pass on to future generations? Talin, did you want to start with this one?
I mean, I can't get away from speaking to the genocide, because that is part of working out the other question too, your identity and your history and where you come from. And but it's not only about cultural. There's so many rich things in our culture that are also a part of my art, and the art, like the khachkars and the illuminated manuscripts, all those pieces come together and come into what I do. So they are all influences for me. And aspect of my art to pass on to future generations. I mean, I feel like the future generations are teaching me things. Like I'm just kind of blown away right now, just at how reading, seeing Instagram, learning about how the younger Armenians are thinking, and I'm just in awe because I wasn't there then when I was their age. And so I hope we can give each other things. And I hope that through my art, you know, I mean, I know that we can give each other things through each of our, because we're in different places, we have our histories and our being younger and things to give each other. I'm sorry, I'm over saying this. Okay, Jackie?
Great, yeah, Jackie.
So can you repeat the question? Repeat the question, please.
Yeah, so which part of Armenian history or culture influenced you most? And what aspect of your art do you want to pass on to future generations?
Okay, so when you say like what aspect influenced me the most, I feel like, there's so many other things within the Armenian culture besides visual, elements. So I immediately think of the food, the making of food. I feel like, like for instance, I've done several painting wallpapers, and those pieces, I did wallpaper tributes to my grandparents, and those pieces were inspired by the memories that I had of the wallpaper in my grandmother's kitchen, a Japanese wallpaper actually. And I used to, while my grandmother, because I would have to help her with making baklava, I would be like entranced in the wallpaper in her kitchen. And so when I got older and had children, and I remember this rich, and also they all had gardens. They all had these amazing gardens, and we would be like scolded if we turned the soil the wrong way. We had to like break down the big clumps and the small clumps. All of those experiences, which I think of as being cultural, affected the way I perceive things. Why I'm attracted to trees is because my grandfather used to sit under a tree, and it's kind of like more of like the life of the way of living was affected my work. So I don't know if that's helpful. And also I wanted to say to Nima, in terms of the food, my son, I cook Armenian food, and my son, there's a city, Armenian town in Iran, Isfahan, and my son just started a company. He's a chef. I mean, he's a musician, but now because of COVID, he can't gig. So he just started something called eatisfahan.com. You can go there, and it's basically Persian, Armenian influenced Persian food, because he's obsessed with Persian food. And so, I feel like, all of these rich things, I think that's why I love to travel. I think I'm an explorer because I realize that there's so many other people out there that have, rich cultures, and I want to connect to them. So anyway, I guess that didn't answer. It went sideways answering. So.
No.
And I have nothing to give to, I mean, the thing that I hope to bring to the future is more emotional stuff that's universal, like the idea of empathy, the idea of overcoming difficulties, those kind of things. I guess those are the ideas that in my work that I hope connect to people.
Thank you. And it kind of leads to one of the other questions here. Has your work ever been influenced by other cultures other than your own? And if so, how? Does anyone have that experience?
Well, I could just say that briefly. I mentioned it before, that studying in Italy and being immersed in around the frescoes, the art, the Christianity, the food, the everything, it became part of my art.
Mm-hmm. Nima, there's a question for you. Your pieces are actually normally very different than the installation piece featured in the gallery and in our art book. Could you speak a little bit about your other work? And I see a really interesting painting behind you. I wonder if that one's yours.
Okay, I was muted. So this actually print, and yeah, I've done it a few years ago, and yes, it's kind of like a figurative, tangled self-portrait. I'm I'm trying to give you, but like the light is not with us tonight. Um, but yeah, that's to be honest, it's a good question, and sometimes I see my works, and I understand that like difference visually, uh, but conceptually there's sort of part of a big whole, one whole. I Because the other part of my practice, for those who don't know, is in drawing, and my drawing are usually self-portrait, and absolutely figurative self-portrait. Some of them are representational, and the other part is deformed, distorted self-portrait. I'm trying to understand the concept of my own identity through my practice. That's more the most important thing for me, to understand who I am, like to observe myself somehow, to ground myself, to settle somehow um, myself in the world. And I think even the installation, my installations, because the Homeland was part of a trilogy. It was there was Homeland Part 1, Homeland Part 2, and that one that we have in the virtual gallery tonight is Homeland, which is the third part. And those are somehow different, visually different from my drawing practice, but through all of these installation as well, I'm trying to understand my identity and my culture and my personal history. My drawings are more expressive, and I think uh, they're coming from the influences of the culture, or the world, or the environment, and I'm reflecting through my drawings, but somehow I like through installation, I'm trying to show those influences, like those physical influences somehow. I don't know if I was I could like describe it, but yeah, like maybe that's the difference. And to be honest, I have to find the answer, and that's my journey through my art.
Mhm. That's great. That's a great answer. Thank
I
you.
think.
So there's a few more questions we'll get through. Talin, this one is for you. Your pieces are so layered. How much is planned? Do you sketch? And what process goes into each piece?
I kind of do both. So sometimes there's planning, sometimes there's reading, there's collecting imagery, there's inspiration that I might draw. But then usually when I start a painting, it's a very kind of loose playing of paint. And yes, there is a lot of layers and things start to come out of. I really like additive subtractive. So I'll put things in, I'll take things away, I'll scrape out, I like sort of the order to come out of chaos. So yeah, so it's a building process, and it's not just images, it's also has to do with information and reading, and yeah.
Thank you. And someone is asking about your family story about the well. Did you want to expand on that?
That is a cousin that is asking that question.
Oh.
And it's not from our side that she's on. And again, I'll just try to keep it short, but my paternal grandfather, who he was one of the guerrilla fighters in Zaytun, I think in the 1800s, the first time around. And I'm not sure how the timeline exactly, but he was captured, and he was in prison for a while. And, you know, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but we always tell this story of the good Turk, the bad Turk story. There were that night he was going to sleep, and one of them said, you know, in the morning, the other guy's going to throw you into a well and kill you. And he said, this is your chance to get away. So he ran away, got to run away on foot. And yeah, that's why we're here. One of the reasons.
Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Great. Okay, well, a big thank you to all of our featured artists today. Thank you all for joining us this evening for our virtual gallery launch of Forces and Factors. I will ask Jen to kind of let us know who the winners of today's silent auction are.
Yeah, thank you everyone for your bids. So I can announce the winner of Jackie's piece of Lot 2 is Jack Stepanyan with his bid. So congrats. Jack will be in touch and we'll figure that out. And for Lot 1, which was the giant big one, we had a late bid, just came in from Kim. So Kim Lemieux, the piece is yours. So we'll also be in contact with you. Thank you everyone who placed your bids. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And thank you very much to Jackie and Sapuri's family for donating these pieces to the Institute.
Thank you.
This will all go towards our work that we do on education and raising awareness on issues of genocide and human rights and diaspora-homeland relations. We have academic journals, conferences, we have oral history collections, and this will all really go towards continuing this work, especially during this difficult time. So we really thank you for that. So now that the gallery is open to the public, please be sure to visit, explore the gallery on your own. You're able to click on the links, you're able to read the little chat boxes, and you're able to share the link with your friends. And again, we would appreciate your purchase of the Forces and Factors art book. It features many additional pieces that weren't in today's gallery, including beautiful poetry and references to the Institute's academic works as well. And we personally think it's the perfect book to leave out on your coffee table or even for guests to browse. And it's also a very meaningful gift. So we do appreciate you purchasing a copy of the book today and making a donation to the Institute. So thank you everyone again. Please stay safe and be well. And thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.